His physician cautioned him. His spouse pleaded with him to quit. Ross Martin, however, disregarded both of them and paid the price with his life on July 3, 1981. Hollywood remained silent for 40 years about the true cause of TV's greatest disguise master's death. The horrific truth about the Wild Wild West star's last minutes on that tennis court has now been made public by horrifying medical records. Robert Conrad, his closest friend, was unable to save him. And his funeral will not even be attended by the studio that profited millions from his talent. In Grodek, Poland, on March 22, 1920, Ross Martin was born Martin Rosenblatt. In an uncertain post-World War I area, his family belonged to the Polish Jewish community, and his father, Isaac Rosenblatt, was a tinsmith. The household was run by his mother, Sarah Lerner. They experienced increasing instability and anti-Semitism, just like many other Jewish families in Eastern Europe. They decided to start over in America, leaving everything behind, because they desired a safer life. Grodek was in Poland at the time of Martin's birth. However, it became part of Ukraine due to changing borders following World War II. The area was always shifting, making things uncertain in life. Over time, his name would also change. Ross Martin eventually replaced Martin Rosenblatt, a moniker appropriate to his new American life. The voyage across the seas started when he was a baby. In Danzig, his family sailed aboard the steamer New Rochelle on August 29, 1920. On September 18, after nearly 3 weeks at sea, they reached Ellis Island. His name was entered as Marcus Rosenblatt by immigration officials, a minor alteration that frequently occurred during the paperwork process. Ellis Island was where millions of immigrants originally went in search of a new beginning. Like the majority, the Rosenblatt family took steerage class. They had to clear stringent legal and medical requirements before they could enter the United States. After being cleared, they moved to the Bronx, a community of immigrants attempting to start over. Before learning English, Ross Martin was fluent in several languages from his upbringing in this planet. He was fluent in Russian, Yiddish, and Polish at home. He subsequently learned Spanish and French. In Italian. One of his greatest assets, which aided him later in life as an actor, was his ability to speak several languages. He even utilized Russian in a few instances while he was playing Artemus Gordon in the Wild Wild West, giving his performances a personal touch. Martin thrived academically in spite of the difficulties of growing up in a working-class immigrant household. At City College of New York, a prestigious institution renowned for teaching a large number of first-generation students, he studied. He demonstrated his intelligence by graduating with a magna cum laude. He then graduated with a law degree from the National University School of Law at George Washington University. He appeared to have a bright future in either business or law. But that wasn't his route. He decided to pursue acting instead of becoming a lawyer. He formed the comic combo Ross and West with Bernie West in the 1940s. Throughout upstate New York, they played in vaudeville and nightclubs, combining fast-paced jokes with physical humor. They were well-timed, and audiences adored them. Martin's ability to make people laugh came naturally to him, and West referred to him as a comedic genius. But they were short-lived. West went into writing and producing, but Martin wanted to look into other entertainment-related prospects. West would work on sitcoms like In the Family years later, but Martin had already advanced to more ambitious projects. He made it to Broadway by 1953. His first significant part was in the musical parody Hazel Flag, which was based on the 1937 movie Nothing Sacred. At the Mark Hellinger Theater, he performed as Dr. Egelhofer for 190 performances. The performance, which had lyrics by Bob Hilliard and music by Jules Stein, was a hit. Alongside his theatrical presence and ability to blend comedy and drama, Martin distinguished himself as more than just a comic. He shared the stage alongside actresses such as Helen Gallagher and Thomas Mitchell. He was fast establishing himself in radio when Broadway opened up new avenues for him. Martin's remarkable ability to transition between accents and characters helped him gain popularity as a voice actor in the late 1940s and early 1950s on radio shows such as Dimension X and The Cavalcade of America, which eventually resulted in The Ross Martin Show, his own show. He demonstrated his ability to play several parts in each episode, occasionally switching between voices so smoothly that viewers were unaware they were all the same. His ability to adapt made him a popular voice actor and facilitated his entry into live television anthologies. Hollywood then called. His first motion picture appearance was in Conquest of Space, 1955, a science fiction epic about the first human expedition to Mars directed by George Powell. In a narrative with groundbreaking special effects and profound philosophical issues, he portrayed Sergeant Andrei Fodor, a supporting character. Although it wasn't a huge blockbuster, the movie marked a significant turning point for Martin. He had an appearance in The Colossus of New York, another science fiction thriller, in 1958, just a few years later. This was only the start of a trip that would span almost 30 years, and his Hollywood career was already gaining momentum. The role of Ann Amo in the CBS sitcom Mr. Lucky, which Blake Edwards produced, was Ross Martin's big break in 1959. John Vivian's smooth-talking gambler had a sidekick named Ann Amo who was a quick-witted gunrunner. The show included a combination of risk and adventure because it was set on a floating casino. Martin's sardonic wit immediately distinguished Ann Amo. His smuggling business takes a negative turn in the pilot episode when authorities discover a secret weapon stash on Lucky's boat. "We are having problems with his deadpan delivery. I am the one who smuggled the firearms," established the tone for his witty character. Off-screen, he interpreted the part in his own way. He came up with his own disguises and even fabricated lines. He spied on mobsters in one instance by posing as a bartender. Another talent that would later play a significant role in his career was his ability to design his own makeup. Although the show received plaudits for its humor and flair, it had trouble with ratings and was discontinued after just one season. Nevertheless, critics paid attention. Martin's portrayal was described by TV Guide as effortlessly engaging, and commended his versatility in juggling many dialects and personas. The filmmaker Blake Edwards, who would be crucial to his career in the future, was introduced to him by Mr. Lucky. Martin stunned audiences with his portrayal in 1962's Experiment in Terror 3 years later. He portrayed the asthmatic psychopath Garland Red Lynch, who terrorizes Lee Remick's character, Kelly Sherwood, a bank teller. It was a radical change from the vivacious Indomo. In order to improve Lynch's uncanny laborious breathing, Martin examined an asthmatic childhood buddy. He also insisted on performing his own stunts, such as a vicious one-take garage attack scenario. It was a horrifying outcome. Lynch makes Sherwood watch him strangle her co-worker over the phone in one of the scariest scenes. His respiration becomes more labored by the moment. It was likened by critics to Anthony Perkins' portrayal of Norman Bates in Psycho. Lynch was described by the New York Times as a master of subtle menace. The figure later inspired Twin Peaks killer Bob, according to director David Lynch, who had no relation to Martin. Martin was nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor for the role, which is an uncommon distinction for a thriller villain. He nearly declined it out of fear of being stereotyped, but it ended up being one of his most memorable performances. Martin demonstrated in The Great Race, 1965, that he could create a villain who was both humorous and menacing. He performed. A cunning nobleman named Baron Rolf von Stupp is attempting to stage a coup in the made-up nation of Carpania. Starring alongside Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis in the Blake Edwards-directed movie, Martin always took center stage. His character's duel with Curtis' hero, Leslie, is one of the film's greatest scenes. The Baron grins and mocks, "I'd rather use a man's weapon. How do you handle a saber?" Martin's comic tie was ideal before they started a classy but absurd sword fight. He even utilized more than 4,000 pies in the tumultuous 10-minute pie fight, where he improvised. Later, he remarked, "I've never been humiliated so deliciously." Critics adored him. His performance was described by Variety as deliciously suave. He mentioned how effortlessly he stole every scene. The movie, which at the time had the largest budget of any comedy at $12 million, solidified Martin's reputation as an actor who could compete with Hollywood's top names. Martin demonstrated his versatility between 1959 and 1965 as the endearing trickster Ann Amo. He was a nightmare come true as Garland Lynch. Slapstick villainy was his specialty as Baron von Stupa. It was uncommon for him to switch between comedy and horror. He attributed his analytical approach to acting to his legal education and multilingual upbringing. His abilities extended well beyond mere performance. Since his early days in Mr. Lucky, he had been developing characters for a long time. According to Blake Edwards, Ross occasionally frightens you in the same scene as making you laugh. That was his magic. He had the gift of being anyone at any time, which made him one of Hollywood's most special talents. The definition of a sidekick on TV was altered by Ross Martin. He was more than simply James West's backup in The Wild Wild West, 1965 to 1969, when he played Artemus Gordon. One of the greatest disguise artists TV has ever seen, he was a master of espionage and a genius with electronics. Even Robert Conrad, his co-star, frequently failed to recognize him until the shoot was in progress because his alterations were so realistic. Created over 90% of his own disguises. He would use wigs, prosthetics, and intricate costumes to create his appearance in his dressing room. The crew had no idea what was going to happen. In the 1967 film Night of the Vicious Valentine, he portrayed a stooped gravedigger with a rubber hump and decaying teeth. Some members of the team thought he was a background actor because of how unusual he appeared. His skill at camouflage extended well beyond cosmetics. For every part, he altered his mannerisms, voice, and motions entirely. Fluent in 8 languages, including English, German, French, Spanish, Yiddish, Polish, and Russian. He had no trouble switching between accents. He added a waxed mustache and an exaggerated Parisian lilt to his portrayal of a flashy French magician in Night of the Raven, 1966. Later, Ken Chase, the makeup artist for the show, acknowledged that Martin was better at transformations than most Hollywood effects teams. While eating lunch, Martin would doodle ideas for disguises on napkins and then make them come to life. It was a physically demanding role as well. He had to spend 12 hours wearing full-body burn makeup while portraying a scarred arsonist in Night of the Returning Dead, 1968. Despite the extreme skin irritation produced by the latex, he persisted in filming. Many were reminded of Lon Chaney Sr., the legendary silent film star known as the Man of a Thousand Faces, by his dedication. Night of the Casual Killer, 1967, featured one of his most unexpected talents. He played the violin version of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major during a difficult covert operation. It wasn't merely a gesture. Had received concert violin training while attending Juilliard in the 1940s. Martin performed live on set as the scenario was captured in a single take. He was given a standing ovation by the personnel. They were crying, even the grips. He was more than simply a fun fact about his musical background. Artemis Gordon incorporated it into her spy gear. He tapped out messages to James West during a prison break in Night of the Fugitives, 1966, by concealing a Morse code transmitter inside a harmonica. Martin Gordon played his violin to unwind off-screen. During pauses, he would play Bach to relax after tough stunt scenes. He nearly lost the part because of his classical training, which is ironic. He was deemed too sophisticated for a Western by the producers during the audition process. To disprove their claims, he devised a scene in which Gordon diverted an outlaw-filled saloon with a fiddle. He got the role because of it. Then tragedy struck in 1968. Martin had a near-fatal heart attack on August 17, while filming Night of the Sabatini Death. Physicians discovered that his left coronary artery was 95% blocked. The co-star of the show was forced to leave when he was taken to Cedars-Sinai Hospital. He never lost performance in spite of everything. A remarkable accomplishment for a show that is frequently written off as cheesy. He was nominated for an Emmy in 1969 for Outstanding Lead Actor. He gained notoriety, but The Wild Wild West was quickly cancelled. CBS terminated the show on March 12, 1969, in spite of the high viewership. The network was forced to make the decision by political pressure, even though the show was ranked number 12 in the Nielsen charts. Following the murders of Robert F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr., Congress began to take action against violent television. CBS continued to telecast the equally violent detective series, Mannix, but The Wild Wild West became a prime target. At that point, Ross Martin was at the peak of his career. During the 4th season of The Wild Wild West in 1968, he had a heart attack that almost killed him. After he healed, he went back to complete the series, but his reputation in Hollywood changed. He was deemed high risk by industry insurers, and major networks withdrew. After growing worries about TV violence led CBS to discontinue the show in 1969, Martin had trouble landing major parts. He had the opportunity to resurrect his career in 1970 when he was offered the lead in the detective series Banyan. However, the producers decided to reconsider after looking over his medical data. Instead, they chose Robert Forster, a younger actor who was in good health. Studio executives were straightforward about their choice, according to Harry Gold, Martin's agent, who later disclosed this in a 1975 TV Guide interview. According to what they informed him, Martin portrayed art critic Dale Kingston in Columbo in 1971, which was appropriate for framing. The producers required a $250,000 insurance bond in case his health prevented him from filming. It was Martin's own expense because the studio refused to pay for it. Although he was nominated for an Emmy for the part, his pay had decreased significantly. His earnings per episode on The Wild Wild West peaked at $15,000. He was making only $3,000 for a single guest appearance by 1973. His problems were not limited to live-action parts. He was cast as Dr. Paul Williams in C-Lab 2020 by Hanna-Barbera in 1972. The studio's insurance stepped in and replaced Martin after just 2 programs. Later, he made a joke, "I'm the only actor who got fired for Heartbeats." He never ceased working in spite of these obstacles. From 1970 to 1981, he secured 87 guest assignments. For villains, quirky geniuses, and enigmatic masterminds, he became the preferred actor. Even while Hollywood might not have trusted him with a leading role, his talent was undeniable. His standout performances in Love American Style, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and Hawaii Five-0 demonstrated that he was still able to command a scene. From the beginning, it had been obvious that he could change into any character. In the Twilight Zone episode The Four of Us Are Dying from 1960, he played a con artist who had the ability to change his appearance at will. Afterwards, Martin invented 4 other accents for the part, including a Southern gentleman and a Brooklyn gangster, according to director John Brom. It wasn't in the script at all. His 1971 performance in Columbo, which was appropriate for framing, was one of his most memorable. His character was Dale Kingston, a conceited art critic who frames his aunt and kills his uncle. To perfect the character, Martin researched Elmer Derry, a real-life art forger. During filming, Peter Falk, who was playing Columbo, broke character and whispered, "I hate this guy," since he was so convincing. A 27.3 Nielsen rating was earned for the episode's climax, in which Kingston is apprehended by art books coated with fingerprints. It became Season 1's highest-rated Columbo episode. His roles weren't always serious. He also had a talent for comedy. He portrayed Professor Patrick Hudson, an inventor who develops a device that transforms water into explosives, in the 1966 do-it-yourself horrible episode of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Delivering a lot of technical jargon was part of the job. Instead of learning lines, he used physics jargon from his old law school textbooks to improvise most of it. Later, director Joseph Sargent disclosed that he had a reactor in his garage. Ross Martin's off-screen life was just as dramatic as his TV ones. Each relationship he had left its stamp on him, and his experience with love and sorrow molded the man behind the personas. On June 17, 1941, he wed Muriel Weiss in a modest wedding in New York City. He performed in comedy clubs at night while attending George Washington University to study law. Phyllis Rosenblatt, their daughter, was born in 1943 and went on to become a well-known artist in New York. Martin was only starting his career, and his marriage became more and more strained as he took on radio work and Broadway rehearsals. They had split up by the late 1950s, although they were never divorced. Martin stayed loyal to Muriel throughout their separation. In 1962, he discreetly covered the cost of her treatment after learning that she had breast cancer. It was an unrelenting sickness. Muriel died on March 15, 1965, at the age of 47, when Martin was filming The Wild Wild West's first season. Concerned about production delays, CBS officials declined to allow him to take time off for the funeral. Martin did not pay attention to them. He took a plane to New York for the night, bid farewell for good, and came back to set the following morning without a nap. "I never forgiven myself for not being there for her when she needed me most," he acknowledged years later. Because of the remorse he felt, he later gave $250,000 to cancer research in her memory. Muriel's death went unnoticed for years. Only until Martin remarried in 1967 did the truth come to light. The decision of her father to move on was difficult for Phyllis, who was 24 at the time. She later claimed that although he loved us, his actual family was Hollywood. Olavi Lucille Parsons and Martin were married in a private ceremony in Beverly Hills on September 10, 1967. She was a former documentary filmmaker and model who had 2 kids from a previous marriage. George and Rebecca were born in 1957 and 1955, respectively. He even changed their birth papers to name him as their father after legally adopting them. Martin saw this move as a means of formalizing their tie, while others thought it was out of the ordinary. Their marriage almost immediately faced a significant obstacle, Rebecca subsequently stated. Martin's near-fatal heart attack occurred in August 1968, during Season 4 of The Wild Wild West. Javi took on the role of full-time caregiver. She snuck oxygen tanks onto the set, made sure he took his medication, and even worked with CBS to get his workload reduced. To keep him on the job, she consented to a 30% wage reduction. All of the stress had a significant negative impact. She miscarried in 1969, a loss Martin never discussed in public. As a family, they held strong through all of this. Under his father's tutelage, Martin's adopted son George followed in his footsteps and landed a part in the 1978 television film The New Maverick. Olavi's influence, meantime, prompted Martin to attempt directing. She persuaded him to helm two Love, American-style episodes between 1971 and 1973. They helped one another through every difficulty, enduring until the very end together. Ross Martin came very close to leaving the job that brought him fame. In 1963, he was offered the role of Artemus Gordon in The Wild Wild West by CBS, but he declined 4 times. He was tired of the weekly televised grind after finishing The Great Race. He was more terrified of being typecast than anything else. Speaking 8 languages, Martin had received training at Juilliard and viewed television as a creative trap. He was looking for challenging roles. It wasn't just something to cover expenses. CBS remained steadfast. Their desire for him was so great that they offered an offer that no actor could refuse. Every episode costs $5,000. Robert Conrad's income was doubled. Inventiveness in his disguises. While they attempted to persuade him to reconsider, even the pilot was placed on hold for 6 months. He had one final request before he eventually consented. Artemus Gordon was never going to punch someone. Martin said he was a scam artist, not a fighter. The authors were compelled to use their imaginations. In Night of the Inferno, 1965, Artemis used disguises, deceit, and devices like the sleeping gas cigar in place of physical combat. Despite the risk, it was successful. September 17, 1965, was the premiere date of The Wild Wild West. Additionally, Martin received 3 times as much fan letters as Conrad in a matter of weeks. Even years later, though, he was still shocked by how nearly he had thrown everything away. He acknowledged in 1978 that it had almost destroyed his own career. "I'm grateful that Blake Edwards called me a fool and made me reconsider." Martin should have made movies with his best work, but one role almost put an end to that hope. He played the role of Red Lynch, the asthmatic murderer in Blake Edwards' 1962 film Experiment in Terror. Although the performance was horrifying, Columbia Pictures did not include his name in the posters or trailers. They feared that viewers would not believe that the Mr. Lucky star was a murderer. It backfired, even though it was meant to increase the suspense in the movie. Audiences were perplexed by Lynch's unsettling presence, despite critics' raves. Although Martin's name was not mentioned, his voice could be heard for 70% of the movie. Even worse, he was rejected by casting directors as a comedic actor when he tried out for other dramatic parts. Even his role in The Manchurian Candidate was lost to Lawrence Harvey as a result. Even if the movie went on to become a cult masterpiece, the harm was already done. When Martin's film offers dried up by 1965, the once-averse actor was forced to make a comeback to television. Despite his skill, Martin's best battle wasn't in Hollywood. With his own heart, that is. In Ramona, California, on July 3, 1981, he passed out on a tennis court at the San Vicente Tennis Ranch. That was a harsh conclusion. He had begun the sport to demonstrate his power following his near-fatal heart attack in 1968. He underwent a rigorous workout and medication regimen after undergoing quadruple bypass surgery in 1975. Nothing was sufficient. He felt lightheaded during a game, according to witnesses, and stumbled toward the clubhouse before collapsing a short distance from the entrance. His heart was at flatline when paramedics arrived, but it took 8 minutes. Later, firefighter Art Bale recalled that his wife, Olavi, was yelling, "Will you please keep him alive?" He was shocked twice, but it didn't help. When they arrived at Pomerado Hospital in Poway, he had already left. The death was officially recorded at 3:17 p.m. The widowmaker, or total blockage of the left anterior descending artery, was the cause. He was later authorized for light exercise by his doctor, but his willpower was stronger than his physical capabilities. When he collapsed, Olavi was only 20 feet away. Since 1967, she had been his pillar of support when he suffered his first heart attack and even smuggled oxygen tanks onto Wild Wild West sets to keep him going. Between chest compressions, she said the Lord's Prayer in the ambulance. When they arrived at the hospital, she insisted he was only napping and wouldn't leave his side for 6 hours. Later, she claimed that the emergency response was excessively slow and filed a $1.2 million lawsuit against the San Vicente Tennis Ranch. A settlement was reached outside of court. In 1968, Martin had filmed a sequence that was almost exactly the same, in which Artemus Gordon pretended to have a heart attack in order to trick the villains. His funeral took place on July 7, 1981, at Mount Sinai Memorial Park in Los Angeles, with over 300 mourners in attendance. However, there were no speeches or grand eulogies. Instead, a rabbi recited a kaddish. Robert Conrad was there, shaken. Blake Edwards later stated that Ross deserved a send-off as grand as The Great Race, but that wasn't his style, and Hollywood hardly responded. Only The Hollywood Reporter and Variety published accurate obituaries. The network that used to pay him more than its top star, CBS, did not send any representatives. Conrad felt enraged. The individual who created the art was disregarded when his presentation was cancelled due to excessive violence. To make matters worse, his death certificate was inserted. Even though he had only been filming a Love Boat episode 3 months prior, it described his employment as retired actor. However, fans never forgot. In remembrance of his most well-known role, they continue to visit his cemetery at Mount Sinai on his birthday and leave small violins. It was best summed up by Leonard Maltin. Ross Martin's death wasn't immediate. That day, a piece of Hollywood's spirit was lost.